Hey guys, it's Eric Green. Listen, how do I make sure that all these potential clients sign my letter and pay me before we start doing work? I use Anchor. Anchor created a fully autonomous billing system and closes the cycle with zero errors. It sends our agreement to the potential client. We'll follow up with them automatically to make sure that agreement is signed. It alerts us when it gets read, when it's signed, and when payment is made. And this way, you know where you are every step of the way. I was so impressed with Anchor, which, by the way, is free. We went to Anchor and have partnered with them. Now, if you go and you register with Anchor, which is free, by the way, if I didn't mention that, you will get access to all of our checklists and letters, okay? But you have to go through our link, all right? Again, by the way, Anchor's free. There is a $5 fee per transaction if you're wondering how they make money. But given that our minimum retainer is $750, it's less than 1%. It's nothing, okay? So again, it's free. They charge the $5, transaction fee on payments, and it will automate your onboarding clients, make follow-up, just puts it on autopilot. It just saves you all that stress and you will close more deals. All right. So sign up here. It's www.sayanchor.com/tax rep. Again, sayanchor.com, sayanchor.com/tax rep, TAXREP. When you go through there, you'll sign up for free and you will have access to all of our letters and checklists, which will save you the trouble of recreating them yourself. All right. Go check out Anchor and put that closing process on autopilot. Guys, I've told my horror story before with S Corp clients and how do you know what reasonable comp is? My horror story is when they went after that CPA who was a friend of mine for $125,000, arguing that he knew and that he knew better and that he should have made sure his clients took reasonable comp. I'm a huge fan of RC reports. RC reports, it's about $1,400 a year. We're charging the S Corps that come to us under audit $750 a piece. We'll probably make between $10,000 and $20,000 with RC reports. But if you have S Corp or C Corp clients, they have to each year get a report, and the report is as simple as possible. RC Reports has a huge database of businesses. It will give you a report that you can rely on. And so far, to date, when we produce that report, not a single auditor has challenged it. The critical thing right now is for your clients to get that report to support the number they're taking on the return, that you're taking on that return that you're signing. Best way to do it, RC Reports. Go check it out, okay? You can find them. It's trn.rcreports.com. Again, trn.rcreports.com. Go there, you'll save $100. It will change your practice, create an annuity stream for you, and bulletproof your clients' corporate returns. The Tax Rep podcast is now proudly partnered with Nice Job, the experts in reputation marketing. Reviews are so important for attracting new clients. Before Nice Job, I would ask people to leave reviews, but they would usually forget, and I didn't have a way to stay on top and remember to follow up with them. That's where Nice Job comes in. Their smart follow-up campaign recognizes who hasn't left a review yet and automatically sends carefully timed reminders that can increase your chances of getting a review by 300%. I tried Nice Job for Tax Rep, and it's been a game changer. We added 33 five-star reviews in our first month, and our Google business profile is like a magnet for new customers. You can try Nice Job for free for 14 days and get 50% off your first 3 months by visiting nicejob.grsm.io/taxrep. nicejob.grsm.io/taxrep. I'm going to put a link in the description of the podcast. Try it. It will be a game changer for your business as well. How do I manage my tax rep practice? How do I get transcripts? How do I track what is going on with the IRS with every single one of my client cases? How do we complete the offer forms, the powers of attorney, everything? We use Tax Help software. Tax Help software is the cornerstone of our practice. We use it for its intelligent ordering. Every single night, it will update the transcripts on our clients, so we will see things happen long before those letters even go to the mail. We can then, react. We can let the client know. We can get all the transcripts we need to determine what our client's best options are, when is the debt going to expire, and we can fill in all of the IRS forms and get them filed accurately, the analysis done correctly. If you're interested in giving it a test, go to taxhelpsoftware.com, use promo code TaxRepTrial, all one word, all caps. You'll get a free 2-week trial. Again, that's taxhelpsoftware.com, TaxRepTrial, all caps, for a free 2-week trial. If you love it and want to buy it, use TaxRep10, capital, all caps, TaxRep10, TaxRep10, all caps, one word. You'll save 10% on your purchase. It will be the engine that runs your tax rep practice, just like it's what we use for ours. Hey everyone, it's Eric Green. Thanks for tuning into this week's Tax Rep Network podcast. I am joined by Luke Kiely. If you don't know Luke, he is SmartVault's Chief Information Security Officer. We're very hype on SmartVault for data backup, security, all of that. In fact, I discovered SmartVault with Don Brolin, actually. We were on an audit together where the client's documents had been destroyed, and she was explaining to the client how to avoid that and setting them up with SmartVault. And I was like, what is that? That was years ago. And so I've been a big fan since. But Luke has held several senior key roles overseeing top SaaS companies, information security, cybersecurity, and data compliance. Luke has also held law enforcement positions where he was instrumental in covertly monitoring and apprehending perpetrators of database cybercrimes. He is enthusiastic about sharing his expertise with accountants to help them safeguard their businesses and personal information against the ever-evolving cyber threats. It's been actually fascinating talking to you, off camera before we got started. This is really a hot topic, and it is also, by the way, with the IRS. They've come out with the WISP, which is sort of, in all honesty, if you look at the list of 6 items, it's sort of kind of like duh, right? I mean, have backup, have a firewall, things that you would think kind of today everyone would have. And then, Luke, I just wanted to mention, I had mentioned this to you before, we actually surveyed our tax rep members because the number one thing I kept getting asked about was about a website. And so I surveyed them. I'm like, do you have a website? Do you have some sort of data backup? 50% of our members said no, and about 50% reported. So 25%, I have a hard no, which is frightening. So the timing of this, I don't think, this is always good to talk about, but the timing couldn't be better. And you've got a unique perspective, both from being in law enforcement, now out with SmartVault, where you probably have people sign up to SmartVault who've been victims, who have had problems, or are just smart enough to be like, you know what, I don't want to have a problem. And so what I think I'd like to start with is, at least from your perspective, sort of what are the core requirements, for lack of a better term, let's call it business continuity.
Yeah. I'm going to probably just go back a little bit because I think I'm going to probably ask you a question. It says, why have we actually got this problem where people are probably a little bit ignorant around, I'm going to say ignorant's a strong word, or probably not aware of the requirements for business continuity. Now, if we look at the demographics in the accounting, and you can probably confirm or deny this, in what end of the spectrum, the age spectrum, are we potentially going to be looking at with people in the accounting industry? And the reason why I ask this is, have we got a group of people from the older end of the spectrum who might not be aware of the role that technology now plays in their particular business? Are they even aware that just by simply being connected to the internet, regardless or not, makes them an automatic victim for cyber-based crime? Mm-hmm. The question is, if that 50%, have we got 50% on who are classed as the millennials, Gen X, Y, Z, etc., who understand and embrace technology as part of their working role? Or have we got another 50% where they just like they come from an old school legacy way of working, simply put, and that might actually influence why technology is or is not embraced within the workplace. The one question I will ask anybody connected to the internet is, do you know what is of any value in your business? Now, if I ask you right now, what's the most important thing in your business, what would you tell me?
Well, let's just say what keeps me up at night is if somebody gets into our system, given what we do, estate planning, corporate planning, and IRS civil and criminal tax, representation, we have a candy store of stuff, ID numbers, banking information, credit card numbers. I mean, it'd be the first. We were talking about that first, and for the audience, I mentioned to Luke, initially I was sort of like, why would anyone want to target us? Because by the way, the conversation was, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I find some of them fascinating. There's a former CIA case officer, goes by the name of, I'm sure it's not his real name, Andrew Bustamante, who now it's called Everyday Spy, where he teaches some of these skills to business people, whatever, not to hack, but in terms of just protecting yourself and whatever. And listening to the conversations about what they can get into, and the Russian hacker says, so it's like, we're not going to stop them, but why would anyone want to target me? And the truth is, information. We have loads of information, and as well as access to money. We have clients' funds in the bank. So, if you're an accountant, and I just want to, focus on the accountants, we all have tons of information that hackers would love to have, right? ID numbers, tax return information, so you can call the government and you can confirm who you are because you have tax information.
Exactly.
Also, there's often direct deposit with your banking information on the front of on the return, or if nothing else, in your electronic file. So accountants who are like, I do a handful of returns. Who wants to target me? Actually, I think a lot of people.
Yeah, perfect. And you've hit the nail on the head. The one thing that everybody, I would say, when I say everybody, I'd say most people who are on an e-commerce, connected to the internet, involved in service delivery, they've all got data of some way, shape, or form. Now, if you've got data from the customer's angle, you've also got data relating to your own employees. You might have financial information. It is valuable, whether you even realize it or want to recognize it or not. That is something that somebody would want to cause you harm over. Now, the one thing I really want to caveat here, and I'll be abundantly clear, yes, we have got nation state actors, threat actors, cyber criminals who have got the capability to get simply where water cannot. Even like you rightly pointed out, even if we've got US governments who are susceptible to being hacked, what does that mean to small organizations? And then you ask the right question. Why would somebody be interested in me, a sole trader, a one-man band kind of thing? It doesn't matter. The fact is, you have got money available to them. Now, let's just take a scenario here where you've got a single accountant, small firm, small amount of clients, whatever. That's their livelihood you're talking about right now. Now, if I take your livelihood away in terms of you can no longer access your customer data, which means you can no operationally transact, you can no longer deliver service, which means you're going to have to stop trading. Let's just think about the business. The business stops. You start losing money. If you start losing money, let's just transfer that into the personal aspect now. If you've got any money, how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to pay for the family's food allowance and so on? The fact is, criminals, directly or indirectly, will want you one way or another. And this is other time I want to also be quite clear about. You have got direct and indirect cyber attacks. And now what I mean by that, you've got a scoped target, which is I'm going to target Eric. I'm going to do a little bit of open source research on him to understand what is it he actually does. What's his online presence? What kind of business does he operate in? Has he got any value to me? I can scope that out, and to be fair, that might be another podcast. Maybe I'll go away and do that and come back and tell you what I can actually find and what would be my approach to someone like yourself. They're targeted, directed attacks. Because of the level of automation and the platforms that are out there, you can get what are indirect attacks. So you get phishing campaigns, which are just like mail blasted out to like tens of hundreds of millions of email addresses, indiscriminately going to millions of people. Now, it's a really low success rate, but they only have to be successful a couple of times for that to be successful at all. Even though it's the return on investment's like low, doesn't matter. And that's what's called an indirect attack. So even though you think that you might be okay because you don't think people are going to directly target, you could be indirectly target and still have the same outcome. All you have to do is open a phishing link, and that will potentially execute malicious software or malware. And then before you know it, you are effectively compromised. So direct or indirect, you've still got to be mindful about being connected to the internet. You are very much a live target, and you have, whether you realize it or not, got something of value, which invariably will be data. And that the value of the data does go up a notch, particularly when you're talking about customer data, names, addresses, telephone numbers, IDs. That does trigger some other legislation, which again you might really want to be aware of when you're actually operating with that kind of material.
Right. And so the IRS has put out the WISP. In fact, we did a program a number of months ago with Right Networks about just running through sort of the basics. But in terms of business continuity, what should the accountants listening to this be thinking about?
The first thing I will ask in any job I go to or do any job, whether it's actually me or if I'm consulting with somebody else, is what is it you're actually protecting at the end of the day? And a lot of the times, if you're going to be protecting data, what type of data? Where is the data? How is the data stored? Who stores it? Exactly. So one thing that we can't escape is obviously the presence of cloud-based storage now. But we also have a group of people out there who may have their own on-prem network, whether that be a server or another computer, whether it just be the computer itself. And you've got to understand is where is that data being stored? How's it being stored? So first and foremost, what is it protecting and why? You've got to actually, there's no point protecting absolutely everything. You really want to narrow that down into the stuff of any real value. That would be the first thing I would do. And I'm not saying going away and doing a massive inventory. Just this, the thing about with security for me, it's got to be practical. At the end of the day, there are, and I'll be really clear, I get a little bored of you need to do this for security. You'll hear so much noise about you have to do this, you have to do that. Look, at the end of the day, you talked about the evolving threat landscape. It keeps evolving. One thing that doesn't keep evolving are the basics. Now, they remain the same regardless. So if you've got like 6 points in the WISP, for example, you've got so many other frameworks. They're all exactly the same requirements. And they're not changing because the basics there. They're fundamental principles that are probably going to be like that for the foreseeable future, regardless of the evolving threat and compliance landscape. Knowing your data is the first point. The second thing is, how are you actually going to protect that data and why? Now, within the finance and the accounting space, you have got certain pieces of legislation which are going to enforce some certain requirements, such as multi-factor authentication. Another big one is backups. Where are you going to store your data at the end of the day? If you're a sole trader, you're a small organization, I would dare say it is not uncommon to see all your data stored directly on your laptop. So if that laptop gets taken out of the equation because it's got some ransomware on it, the machine's so old that it dies, where exactly is your business going to operate from after that point? So if you've not got any backups, any redundancy, any sort of resiliency whatsoever, I mean, your business can fail like that.
We had a client. It's funny. It was we had a client who it's kind of a funny story. I'm away on vacation with my family, and we pass by it every night on our way home. Both Jeff and I, where we live, and he texts me. He says, "Hey, place is on fire." I'm like, "Wow, Tuesday night, it's busy." He said, "No, it's burning down. Like it flames. The whole. It was started by the electric company actually, where the wires came into the wall." And what's funny is I told that to the client a month later. He's like, "I had the same conversation. I texted my wife, the place is on fire." She's like, "Wow, is it busy?" He said, "No, it's burning down." Anyway, I said, as it turns out, we need financial data. All right, where's your backup? He said, remember the computer on the other desk? And I said, yeah. He said, that was the backup. So his computer and his backup both went in the fire because there was no offsite or no cloud-based backup. His backup was literally to the other computer on the other desk. By the way, if you're listening, that's a bad idea. All right, don't do that. But yeah, so I mean, the backup, whether and I do want to talk about ransomware because I actually I know an enrolled agent that was hit with ransomware. But I think the idea and where we're going is we need to, whether it's the next pandemic, whether it's a fire, whether it's ransomware, to be able to shut down or have wherever we are, if it's gone, to be able to literally log in and work from someplace else to recreate or bring that data back. And I'm betting a lot of folks, having just surveyed our own members, if they do have a backup, I'm not convinced it's actually somewhere secure, that it could be on the desk next to them.
No, that's it. Look, and I suppose this is not a criticism. This is just simply asking the question. If you take security out of what I do, it is simply about protecting the business at the end of the day. It doesn't get any more complicated than that for me. I'm about supporting the business's growth and protecting that in whatever way, shape, or form that may take itself. So, yes, I think we will probably find the presence of backups within the office is going to become a thing of the past before we realize it, whether that be to another laptop within the actual same room. Look, there's not necessarily anything wrong with doing that. But what I would say is you might want to put it in a different geographical area, like back it up to your home network, maybe back it up to another office or into a hosted service, or even the cloud. I mean, the thing with the cloud is there's a lot of advantages to backing up to the cloud, and it takes a lot of hassle away from you. It's not without some gotchas or some tripwires there. You've got what's called the shared responsibility model. So just because you're putting data up into Google or to AWS or to Azure, you're still going to understand what is it that hosting service is going to do for you and what aren't they going to do for you as well. That's, look, at its most basic point, what data do you need to protect? How are you going to protect it? Why are you going to protect it? You know, they're the most basic questions. And if you want to go into a lot more depth with that, depending on the size of the organization, you can start risk assessing it and actually putting risk plans around it. Probably a separate conversation, I suspect, on how and why you would do that. More than happy to help people with that particular conversation if needs be. But fundamentally, simply put your data in another place where if it were to be ransomware, if it were to be burnt down in a fire, if it were to die because it is effectively old equipment, you have got the ability to continue trading. You simply just go and pluck it out from wherever it is and just carry on as you were. So, yeah, there's so many different ways of working for this.
You know, and one of the things I think is important is, it's not even a question, more of a statement. There's no business that's too small to do this, right? I mean, everyone, the big firms, but in fact, I'm going to suggest if you're a small practice or solo, it's almost more important. Those big companies, they have this down pat for just obvious reasons. I mean, there's a university here we do a lot with. They have servers replicated at all three campuses. And we had this once. We had tornadoes go through here, Luke, and so we were at a different campus. And at the time, I was like, well, thankfully, the campus where we're holding our event wasn't impacted. And we got there, and they said, yeah, this is years ago. All the servers are at the one that got wrecked. So we're having a problem now and they did we were delayed, but they managed to replicate, get something up, and it went on. But since then, they now have everything replicated at all three sites, which are geographically separated for that reason. You have a disaster at one, the others, it's there. They can continue operating. So bigger places, I think, should have this. It's the small firms, and you know why? And I'm not that old, but I am getting to the age where the technology is getting away from me. Like my son has to explain things on my iPhone to me. I am becoming my dad. Anyway, I think to a lot of points, like, I don't get it. And you know what? Ignorance is bliss, right? Out of sight, out of mind. Who'd want to target me? We were talking about this, the old, why don't you talk about the Mike Tyson quote?
Oh yeah, exactly. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Right. Everything's fine until it happens, right? And then when it happened,
Exactly.
so that enrolled agent that I'm friends with, she told me she got ransomware. I mean, a ransomware attack. They demanded $10,000. She did not have any cybersecurity. She did not have it backed up. And so she actually paid them. And luckily for her, they actually released it. But I'm wondering how often they get paid and don't release it. And the normal advice is don't pay them because you're inviting, basically you're rewarding them. But easy to say when you're not in it. You're in it. But,
yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting question, that, and I say that from someone from law enforcement, which I think you'd probably find there's probably nowhere else, well, in the Western world, where law enforcement will simply say, yeah, just pay the ransom. I would say 99.999% of the time they'll say never ever, pay the ransom. You are fueling the cybercrime economy. What I would say is this: the decision to pay a ransom or not has to be a business decision. Now, I say that as if you don't have any backups, for example, and your livelihood is dependent on getting that data back, what are you going to do? Are you going to pay the ransom? Are you not going to pay the ransom? Like I say, I don't want to go against law enforcement experience, but again, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of somebody whose livelihood depends on this. Look, I understand the sentiment behind not paying the ransom. I've been there, but at the same time, this has to be a business-led decision on what would you actually do if you paid the ransom. And also now, if you look at some of the legislation which is actually coming around that is being enforced across the US, is if you pay the ransom, what legal implications are you going to be faced with if you do that? And what if you don't tell, your particular industry body that you have actually done it? There are some serious consequences by doing so. Something to be aware of.
Right. Right. So, being at SmartVault, which by the way, I mean, you're not going to say it, I'll say it. SmartVault is a great way to do this. And by the way, very simple. So if you are a solo small person with a laptop and everything's on that laptop, a simple way is simply set up with SmartVault and back everything up to SmartVault. If the laptop gets destroyed, wiped out, stolen, flooded, you throw it at the neighbor and forgot that that's where all your data is, whatever, you can get a new laptop or log into SmartVault and pull everything down and continue. So, there's a benefit to that. And as I said, Dawn Brolin and I, and Dawn's been on the program, she introduced me to SmartVault because we had a client who, and this always happens. So they lived, not this part, but the fact that after everything got destroyed is when they got audited. It always happens that way. So they live in an apartment building. There's a fire in an apartment below them. No big deal. The water, the fire suppression system, the water kicked on. It pretty much floods the apartment. If you've never been in that, it is a massive amount of water that comes. It's not like a little bit of a spray. It basically destroys everything with the water, but it puts the fire out. All of that ran down into their storage unit, right into their filing cabinet, and turned everything into paper mache, which they didn't find for like a week or two because it didn't affect them. They go into their storage unit and find that it's a lake. And as they're opening up, we have photographs of it's just mush, everything now, all their papers. Of course, they get an audit notice. And so Dawn is brought in because she's a forensic accountant. We're reconstructing. But that's when she said, look, because they're like, well, what should we have done? Let me introduce you to SmartVault. And she eventually helped get them set up with SmartVault. But it's actually how I found it. And that's sort of one of these things that if you're an accountant or an attorney, you need to have some way of having your stuff backed up. Um, in terms of going paperless, you talk to attorneys, especially, well, less space, less filing cabinets. But the biggest thing is it doesn't fade. It doesn't get destroyed by, bugs. It's not, you're not paying for storage. It's there. It's there forever. Right. Up in your SmartVault account. You must have seen lots of fascinating things given your background, plus also now your view at SmartVault. Um,
Yeah, I look
we love war stories, by the way.
Oh yeah, I've got a few. Like I've dealt with. I mean, bearing in mind the whole ransomware drive for me, that was 13 years ago, where I was really seeing small businesses who are really the target, where you can, you've got a lot of tools out there that simply allow you to ask the internet a certain question of saying what businesses that are connected to the internet are vulnerable to this particular exploit. You literally pump that in and it'll go away and actually retrieve the results and give you literally a list of targets. And I cannot tell you the number of small businesses who have literally been completely destroyed within an instant, simply because they just didn't have the ability or the resilience in place to stop against either the attack starting in the first place, or the ability to back up and resume operations after such an event. And it's really just, it's just, I'm trying to work out the best word here. It's soul destroying to see somebody whose livelihood is effectively in the gutter now because of such an act. So yeah, I think, look, I've gone from the one thing I will say, you will typically expect a hacker who's sitting in a dark room in front of a computer or wearing a hoodie or something like that. The reality is they are simply not like that. I could be talking to a hacker right now and not even know about it. They are normal people who have got the ability to do really bad things with the internet. And that means that we have got a humongous cyber crime workforce out there 24/7 who will do this just for giggles, to test their skills or even cut their teeth on making this an actual job at the end of the day. So whether people realize or not, there will always be a target just by simply being connected to the internet. The one thing I have probably really started, I'm a massive fan of managed services. And the reason why I like that, I like being able to pass risk onto somebody else to manage that risk for me. So take data, for example. We are effectively a cloud-first organization. So we try to go as effectively as paperless as we possibly can. And we give the responsibility for hosting and storage to other organizations who are far more equipped, got more security, got a bigger resource. They can do it a lot better than what we can ourselves. And, when you get that mindset of saying, I'm going to trust another organization to do that for me, I think when people get in that mindset, you're taking a massive burden off you having to worry about that yourself. Thinking about, I need to have a laptop or a server or another hard drive in a different place, and I have to back it up. Let somebody else do that for you. Yes, it's complex. It doesn't need to be complicated in the way you do it. It is actually a lot easier than people are probably even aware of. So, take the security and the backup resilience that you've got there. You've got the ability for consistency and to take away the operational overhead of doing it yourself. So I'm a massive fan for cloud-based storage, and particularly the platforms out there. They are very, very usable.
I mean, for one of the attractions to me, aside from security and backup, I'm at a point where my kids are starting to leave. Right, they're finishing high school, going off to college. My wife and I can travel finally, and in Miami, I was in Chicago, I was in Israel this year. Log in, work. I can access my stuff from anywhere. And yeah, I can, I've had people, I can log into the computer in the office, but assuming that's gone, and I not to be doom and gloom, but climate change, everything else we see here I'm in Connecticut. We are getting wilder and wilder tornadoes, hurricanes. It's like we've become Miami. The humidity, and so we're getting rain, heavy pounding rain. I'm starting to find little leaks in my house we've never had before. And I was talking to the contractor. He's like, when you get a sustained pounding rain, those vents on the roof, it's something's going to get in. So
Yep.
between all of this, I think the risk to infrastructure that my computer at home will be working, power may be out, whatever. I've just found it's, aside from the security, it's also the convenience. I can pull up my laptop. I was in Tel Aviv with one of my sponsors, Anchor. I was in their offices, pulled out my laptop. I can log right in, pull down information, and I'm working with them as if I were sitting right here in New Haven. And so I don't know about the people listening, if they want to be mobile, they want to, at some point live their, work their way, that all the remote work these days, it's actually more important now that you can access stuff from anywhere, which gives you more freedom. So yes, there's security. Yes, there's the hacking, but also just to untether yourself. And again, I'm going to bring it back to SmartVault. I can log in and my stuff is there. I mean, and Don Brolin, Don and I were just at Scaling New Heights in St. Louis, where we have an appeal, IRS appeal going on. She logged in, pulled down the information, and she and I were playing. What if they go this way? What does that look like, right? And we're working on that as if we were here without having to email copies of spreadsheets. We can just work on it and it's all backed up. That kind of ease. So from a business perspective, that alone is a reason to do it. But the ransomware, the hacking, the flooding, the fire, you name it. Have you seen folks come to SmartVault because they've had an incident? And Luke, I'm not sure if you have your finger on the pulse, but I'm curious if you've seen an uptick at SmartVault, and if it's because of people have had a bad experience, or they're trying to avoid. If you have any kind of a sense on what drives people to come in.
Look, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I think you've got to take the modernization of the world at the moment is that people are naturally going to have to start adopting technology in some way. So yes, we have seen people organizations who have come from a bad place where they've got older ways of working and they've modernized, knowing that there's simply that convenience factor by actually giving it to somebody else, and the flexibility of the workforce, allowing working from home, which is becoming such a prominent thing post-COVID. So there is an aspect of that, but I think people, other organizations, they are seeing the value of modernizing and giving that data to someone else that just gives them so many more options. You've got your compliance aspect because you're giving that to an organization who, from my perspective, I've got to follow every single piece of legislation across the US that affects data in some way to make sure that we're meeting and exceeding the expectations, which by consequence is passed down to our customers, because by using that, we're now, they're actually, and that's an interesting point, is that, don't just necessarily focus on what the compliance says to tick that box to get it. What is it that your technology can do to actually help you meet your compliance? Look at it from a different angle. The operational side of technology can mean, if I use this particular product or I use this particular supplier, they're actually going to help me meet compliance that I was actually not intending to. So look, I think the evolution of technology and the modern world is meaning that people are having to move towards more modern ways of working. And it's interesting because you talk about security and convenience. Typically, the two are at odds with one another. They don't need to be. By working more securely, you get more flexibility and functionality. When we've implemented new ways of working within SmartVault now, which are inherently more secure, but are significantly easier for our end users to operate. And you'd say, security teams say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're stopping from working. But we've now, single sign-on, for example, that means that you've got a streamlined way of working, which is significantly easier to get into a variety of different platforms. So, I think modernization is becoming a thing that everybody needs to think about.
Yeah, no, and it used to be security meant roadblocks, right? I remember, and show my age, when I started at KPMG a long time ago, I got this digital card, and it would have a code that would change every 30 seconds, and then you would have to use that. And that only got me onto my computer at work. And we lost power once in Boston. I was living outside of Boston. And so now I'm calling is anyone in the office who can go turn my computer on? Right. And so the old days of doing it, now, like you said, I just log on and it's there. It doesn't matter what's going on with the computer in the office. It doesn't matter what, and I can do it from anywhere. And I don't have a special key card. I think that today the technology makes it safer, but also far more convenient. And I tend to agree with you. I'd much rather have you folks at SmartVault dealing with this than me trying to figure it out myself and doing my own backup to, maybe it's not the computer on the other desk, but somewhere. The third party solution to me is, frankly, a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the thing is, I'm not saying that's not necessary. You might actually have an inclination or even like doing that side of thing, but you just want the ability to go to work and focus on what you're good at, and focus on making the business successful. And you might see that you get detracted or distracted by having to worry about things like backups and having to worry about security. You think that just is going to potentially be a bit of a drain on your ability to do your job. And that's why I personally favor managed services, for that very reason, because they tend to be a lot more efficient and cost effective than doing it yourself. So yeah, I think you'll probably see the evolution of managed services just continue to grow and grow and grow over time. They're just, don't get me wrong, you've got to take them with a degree of caution. You've got to ensure that whoever you're using can be trusted. Have they got the right measures and security measures in place? Are they compliant with your specific industry vertical? Have they got what you need at the end of the day? All valid questions that you need to ask. But again, managed services, I do think, have a lot of advantages, particularly in the space where you're protecting very sensitive information and data.
I agree. And so, Luke, if anyone listening wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Probably the best way would be, let's go with privacy@smartvault.com. That's probably the easiest way of contacting us. You could probably go onto the SmartVault website and submit requests through the general entry email address into the business. I'm on LinkedIn, drop me a line. I like what I do. My job is also my hobby, which my wife hates because I'm never offline. I'm always researching things, but it's because I love doing what I do. So if I've got the opportunity to give back in the same way I did when I was in law enforcement, I will happily do so.
Great, thank you. And yeah, no, I'll put that email in the description, as well as a link to SmartVault, so you can go check that out. And I guess, Luke, any final thoughts?
What would I say? Make security practical. It is not insurmountable. It's probably relevant to everyone, whether you realize it or not. And to be fair, I think it's really quite interesting. Yes, it can be complex, but it's not complicated. Just look at what technology can do to make your life easier at the end of the day. And if nothing else, just think about your own livelihood in terms of what can technology do to safeguard your business and consequently your personal livelihood, is what I would say.
No, good advice. And all right, everyone, listen, Luke, thank you for joining us. This has been great. I will put the email and the link in the description. Everyone, thank you for listening in, and go check out SmartVault. If you do not have a backup, I highly recommend it. I know Don does as well, and it's critical. It really is critical, because, as he said, you don't want to have to sort this out when you're the victim. And by the way, it will destroy if you have a tax practice or accounting practice, it will destroy your practice when you have to email all of your clients and inform them that you've been hacked. That's not going to go over well. The accountants I know that have had that have seen it hasn't necessarily destroyed their business, And I don't know what the average is, but a large chunk of clients will be departing. And
to be fair, Eric, that's a really valid point. Actually, just before we're about to close, actually, the reputational impacts of an attack or a data breach. Now, your data might not necessarily be in compromise, but if you're going to potentially be exposing your own client to your own supply chain as a result of that unauthorized access, or like cyber attack, or whatever it may well be, the simple fact is everyone's literally going to give you such a wide berth, thinking, I don't want to touch you anymore, simply put, you're exposing me to some risk. Reputation will simply tank if you're not right. So, yeah, very, very valid advice.
Yep. No. So, all right. Now, everyone, listen. Luke, thank you. Everyone, thank you for listening in, and see you next week on the Tax Rep Network podcast. Thank you.